Tonight's teaching has two potential timers to it. One is the 30 minutes I'm aiming at, and the other one is if my voice decides to give out before that. So we're going to see how this goes. Kenzie loves when my voice gives out, and so it's like one of her favorite times of year. She was disappointed the last 2 years my voice didn't disappear, and she was really, really devastated. But then a few mornings ago, I woke up, and it was squeaky and scratchy and not there, and she was like, yes! I missed that. Thanks, Dad has his girl voice. So that's what I get. But let's jump in. That had nothing to do with what we're talking about. It's taking my time in your time. The Gospel of John says that God put on flesh and moved into the neighborhood. That's John 1:14 in the Message. Other translations say that the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. This idea that God himself wrapped himself in flesh in Jesus and a miracle of miracles entered into humanity, fully God, fully man, and began to live life as a human being, though he was God. That alone is enough to unpack for the rest of your life in trying to figure out how that hurricane of a force, God, was put in a bottle, namely a flesh bag like you and I have. Mind-blowing. What we realize is that there's no divide between the sacred and the secular, the messy and the ordinary. God himself walked among us. He connects all things in people. We're a church living out this reality by empowering everyday normal people like us to inhabit this wild spirituality, this way of following Jesus and his kingdom way of life, where we embody a kingdom that has arrived in part and will one day fully come in full. We follow Jesus, who couldn't reign anymore if he wanted to right now, but who will also come one day to fully and finally set up all things. We have the Spirit of the living God. John, at the end of his gospel, will say that Jesus told his disciples, "The Father sent me, so I send you," and then he breathed on his disciples. And then a little bit later in the book of Acts, the Pentecost, the Spirit came on all believers and has subsequently stayed with all believers since that point. Like God himself indwelling humanity to live a life that's modeled after Jesus' own life. Mind-blowing stuff. That takes place in homes, coffee shops, workplaces, schools, parks, streets, and in our neighborhoods. Missio Dei huddles in smaller communities scattered throughout the East Valley, the West Valley, and regular old Phoenix in order to be a gospel presence, light in those places where darkness seems to try to lay claim, saying, no, the light has come and the darkness will not overcome it. And so we long to see these spaces, our everyday spaces, look a little bit more like heaven has come to earth, because indeed we believe that is true. And so over the course of Epiphany, which is the next few weeks, some of you might have noticed the colors changed in the back of the room. Kenny and Mike switch those up this week. Yellow shows that this is a season in the church calendar of celebration. The purple shows a lot more of the penitence, the reflection, a lot more marked by fasting. This would be a season in the church epiphany. The realization that Jesus has come and recognizing what that means for the world is a time of celebration. And so we switch it up to gold. And so it's just a reminder, even in the aesthetics, that this is a season where we rejoice that the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. Would you pray with me? And we're going to jump into John chapter 2. Jesus, thank you for taking on flesh. Philippians reminded us that you did not consider equality with God something to be grasped, but made yourself of nothing, taking on the form of a servant. Like you became a human so that we could be rescued. And so, Jesus, as we sit together in your presence with your word, hearing a story of your life, would your Spirit stir up in us afresh repentance where needed, encouragement where needed, conviction where needed. And God, would we as your people recognize what it means that you moved in and took up residence? And might we do the same in the various places and spaces that we call home? We ask this in your name, by the power of your Spirit, Jesus. Amen. So this is one of those days you're supposed to remember in all the right ways. You know, the kind of day that you plan for, the kind of day that you save up for, the kind where you're hoping that nothing goes wrong, the kind where you seriously and strategically plan for everyone to have some real fun. So everything has been arranged. Guests arrived a little early, but no worries. They were brushing the dirt off their robes as they came into your home, but you were prepared for that. Lawn games set up, kids having a good old time at their stations. Adults were quick to get a beverage in their hand. Kids were enjoying a glass of water as they were ready for the party to begin. And boy, was it a party. The tables were packed, the plates were full, the music was loud, too loud for Grandpa, but you wouldn't have it any other way. Laughter bounced off the courtyard walls. Friends and neighbors from towns away had come in just to be at this party. And for a while, everything felt right. More than all right. This was the way life was meant to be lived. Full, enjoyable, with the people who matter the most close by. This was the way that real life was always meant to be celebrated. But then it shifted. And maybe not all at once, but there were a few signs. A servant walked quickly and whispered to his friends by the drink station. Nervous glances as people looked toward that corner table at the end of the line. And then came the words, quiet but heavy, "We're out." Not just the wine, but your planning, the perfect moment, the joy. You had done everything right. You had planned well. You had been careful, but it still wasn't enough. The words were there. We've run out. In your world, that kind of failure doesn't stay private for long. Shame spreads. People remember. But that's when he stepped in. And it wasn't with a speech or with a spotlight. He didn't even ask you if he could. In fact, it was just a quiet conversation that you didn't hear about till later on when you said, "What in the world just happened?" A strange instruction given to servants. Stone jars sitting unused were filled with water. And in an instant, your shame was averted and the celebration continued. Most people never even noticed what happened. They only saw the outcome. The steward was holding a cup, the pause, the surprise in his voice when he said, "Most people serve the best wine first, but you saved the best for now." And no one fully understood what he really meant. They were just there enjoying it, but realized later what had happened. A few people did know everything that had happened. The servants, his mother, his disciples. But because of his action, the shame never went public. The celebration didn't collapse. The story didn't end where we thought it might. You had never asked for a miracle. You may not have even known you needed one, but Jesus moved in and his kingdom was here. That's the story from John chapter 2, a wedding, a shortage, a quiet act of great mercy and care and provision. And John's telling us something very, very important as we look at this first miracle, or this first sign is what John calls it, of Jesus. This event that took place in history where Jesus stepped onto the scene and did something that connected his story to the story of Israel in the past and the story of humanity in the future. And so I'm going to read this story one more time. We're going to read it from the NIV. The words will be on the screen. And I want you to think, as I'm reading it, what do we learn about God and his kingdom from this story? We're looking at different stories for the next few weeks, recognizing that if God moved in, if God came and took on flesh, and John tells us that we have never seen God, but we have seen Jesus, and he shows us exactly what God is like. And we're people who are called by God and given his name, and then we inhabit that story in the same way that Jesus did, following his methods and his message. We don't save people the same way he did, but we're sent with the same spirit to continue his mission. What does that look like for us is just the question that we're going to be asking on repeat from a few different stories over the next few weeks. So let me go ahead and I will read this to us. And then we'll just ask that question, have you guys come towards one another. On the third day, a wedding took place in Cana in Galilee. I just love this. John starts his book with a third day. I don't know what that could be looking forward to in the future. We might get to other stories in John where things also happen on the third day. But don't worry about that. We're going to just read, though. On the third day, a wedding took place at Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples also had been invited to the wedding. When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, "They have no more wine." "Woman," Jesus said, "why do you involve me? My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Nearby stood 6 stone water jars, the kind that were used by the Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding 20 to 30 gallons. Math majors can figure out what 30 gallons times 6 is. What is it? Hey, kids, it's dead. Adults are using it now, and they think they're funny. I know. It's 2026, bro. Hey, the math majors, not the theology major, okay? 190 is what I was told. That's a lot of water. I know. I wasn't going to publicly shame them. Jesus takes their shame. It's 180. Let's do it. All right. So fill the jars with water. So they filled them to the brim. And then he told them, now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet. And they did so. When the chief steward tasted the water that had turned into wine, he didn't know where it had come from, but the servants who had drawn the water knew. He called to the bridegroom. What people normally do, he said, is serve the good wine first, and then the worst stuff when people have had plenty to drink. But you've kept the good wine till now. This event in Cana of Galilee was the first of Jesus' signs. He displayed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. After this, he went to Capernaum with his mother, his brothers, and his disciples, and he remained there for a few days. You're welcome to open your Bible if you need a refresher, but I'm going to give us a few minutes right now. Would you just turn to a few people around you? What do we learn about God and his kingdom from this story? John strategically places this at the beginning of his gospel. This is the first recorded sign that Jesus does. And as you look at anything, that first activity is done with intentionality. He even pauses his mom for a second and says, hey, it's not quite time, but he's still going to do this miracle. And so his timing mattered. What he's doing in power matters. The method that he uses, even what he's communicating by the miracle, all matters. And so I'm going to have us just spend a few minutes in a smaller little segments. If you're new to Missio, we do this often. And if you're like, I don't want to answer that, just look at somebody else. They'll start talking. It works every time. If not, just close your eyes like you're praying. Nobody will bother you. Ready? Go ahead. But nobody ever takes that option. It's just a joke. All right. Turn towards a few people around you. What do we learn about God and his kingdom from this story in John chapter 2? Ready, set, go. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, we are going to take a few minutes. If there's something that you thought of in your group that you want to share with the larger community, throw your hand up. Kaylee Ann will bring you a mic. We're going to do about 4 or 5 of these. And so if you're somebody that likes to wait till the end, till it's like really deep in the roster, like 15th, 16th, we're not going that long. So I'm just letting you know up front. We got like 4 or 5, and then we're going to keep rolling. So go ahead, throw your hand up, though. We would love to hear what caught your attention. What do you learn about Jesus, God, and his kingdom from the story? Throw your hand up. Kaylee Ann will get you the microphone.
The servants were the only ones who knew what was going on. And that means that in God's kingdom, the servants are important.
I want to add to the servants that they actually got to play a role in it happening. It wasn't like Jesus just, snapped his fingers and the jars were full of wine, but the servants actually were told to go out, fill them with water first. So they played a role in the miracle.
That counts as one. We keep going. A few more. Throw your hand up, and we'd love to get you the mic. Yeah, Ben.
We talked a little bit about, we're curious, what was Jesus' motive in performing this miracle? Like, what was he trying to accomplish? And the story doesn't seem to really indicate what Jesus was trying to accomplish. It seems that all this was prompted by the ask, and that what prompted Jesus to do something was that someone asked him to, which is a really, really cool thing. And I think a theme we see all throughout, like, the narrative of Scripture is when people ask God to do something, he responds.
That there was like this abundance of wine, like there was more than enough. Like 180 gallons, I'm assuming, was way more than they probably needed. So like just that idea of like there's abundance in the kingdom, there's plenty.
Yeah. Anybody else?
I'll kind of piggyback on that just a little bit, but kind of as they said, obviously the best wine that had been there was probably served early, but then what Jesus produced was even so much better than what their best wine was. So it's this little picture of the kingdom and what it brings is going to be so much better than anything we even expect.
I love it. Anybody else? This hasn't happened in like years. Do you guys notice what happened? Only guys spoke. And so we have a rule, I can't keep going unless a woman does as well. So that has literally not happened for years of me doing this. And that I cut it short, and I didn't realize when I did that we're going to cut out. So thanks, Britt.
I will, in true woman fashion, also share that my insight, though, was we talked about, and I thought it was interesting, about Mary's role. And, her asking and her knowing that Jesus would be able to provide and do a miracle. Like her belief and trust. And that like enacted this whole thing, which Ben, you brought up, but more specifically, like Mary's participation in it. And thinking about how she had watched him grow up, like his mom, like seeing Jesus grow up as a boy and as a man now, being like, this guy could get you some wine if you ask. So.
Sorry, Brittany, just saying that made me think about how I hadn't thought about it before, where when the dove came, when he got baptized by John, his father had blessed him essentially, but thinking of how even God's kindness towards Mary as a mother, in a sense, her blessing and saying something over him and kind of kicking it off, if you will, to some degree. It's almost like God's heart for Jesus' mother, even to be somebody that blesses him before his ministry starts, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, John only references Mary twice in the gospel. This first time where he says, it's not yet my time, to his mom. And then at that moment at the cross, right, when he said, now is the moment where it's being fulfilled. And Mary's present there, and he makes sure that John's going to care for his mom as he is crucified. Like, those are the two moments. Like, John does that on purpose. There's a not yet my moment where she's like, I can engage with this. I can deal with this. I can help. I can be a part of this. But how much more in that moment when he's dying on the cross, dealing with the shame of all in that moment. All who would believe find rest under that moment. It's even greater than this moment where heaven and earth were literally being brought back together in a way that wedding only spoke to in the future. John's got both. Those are his two stories about Mary. Just fun fact, because I know we're not doing verse by verse through John, but that's a fun fact. I put a few of these together that I saw as well. You guys already mentioned some of them, but I just wanted to give us a few that we learned. This is not a comprehensive list, and even as we take any of these stories, there's always going to be more to unearth. But the first thing that I had in there is that we notice that in the kingdom, God's dealing with transformation. The simple act of impossibility of turning water to wine is an illustration. It's a sign pointing to the fact that what God in his kingdom doing is about changing things that otherwise would remain unchanged. It's about him bringing in his own power and doing something in the created order that shifts the way things operate, that's decidedly different than what you would expect. We could go 100 for 100 in this room, and none of you would be able to turn water into wine. I guarantee, I put money on that one, right? Like, I feel I'm not a betting person. I always say I'm too poor to bet. I don't have the money that I can lose if I was. But that particular bet, I would go all in on. We would go 0 for 100 in trying to turn water into wine. I'm sure there's a pastor somewhere that does some nifty trick on the table where he pours water into a new glass and it turns red. I'm not that guy, and we also know it wouldn't taste like wine. And so we're not going to do that. But we'd go 0 for 100. In the kingdom, though, God is about bringing transformation, and I don't want us to miss that. As we look at what happens when Jesus moves in, he brings transforming power. Don't miss this. When Jesus sends you into a community, he sends you with his power, which is also meant to bring transformation to neighborhoods, networks of friends, jobs, relationships, families, that in his name and by his power, transformation is part of the currency of the economy of the kingdom. Things change that have no business changing when Jesus moves in. This is the first of just 7 signs we're going to see, but it is a powerful sign. And what I love about it is the transformation happened quietly and off in a corner, but it was to the benefit of all who were there. The second thing that we can look at that is shame gets interrupted. This is a cultural nuance that really does carry over to us today. It was just like theirs was shame on steroids because their whole culture operated in shame and honor in a ways that our doesn't necessarily, so we don't quite get it. But let's be honest, if you're throwing a party and you run out of hot dogs, it's embarrassing, right? Like if you throw in a party and there's no more Coke and everybody wanted Coke and all you have left is Sprite, you're like, dang, should have bought more Coke. Like that would have been Coca-Cola. Sorry for I don't know how you guys all party. Let's be clear. Coca-Cola, Pepsi. There's not enough Pepsi. We need Sprite. All right. Like there's not enough. I don't know how you guys party. We got to be clear about these things. Thanks, Jake. I like you. Jake's giggle made that worth it. Hope it made the audio. We've got, yeah. Shame gets interrupted. For that, in that culture, it would have been that times a million. To invite all your family and your friends, to do all the preparation and just have gotten it wrong so that everybody's there. You're in this party, the city's shut down. It's a multi-day event most likely. And to run out of enough wine for everyone would have just been the story that everybody told, the cautionary tale. At the very least, bad luck for the rest of your marriage. At the very worst, that would have been, do you remember Kevin and Kaylee Ann? They're the ones who ran out of wine. Yeah, I remember them now. Let's keep going. This black mark of shame. And what Jesus does is beautiful in this story. We don't have any record of the groom or the bride asking Jesus, hey, any chance that you've got some miracles for us? Any chance that anybody has some wine? We don't see any of that. We see Jesus' mom intervening on behalf of the bride and the groom and their families because it would have been shame for all of them. And then in that process, he circumvents what would have been shame-filled in a way that others don't even have to see it. The only reason we know about it is because it's written down, which I guess kind of, I don't know how they felt about that. Probably pretty excited because they got to be a part of the miracle, right? They're not carrying the shame of that. Like, yeah, we were, but then we were also Jesus' first sign. So that's what happens. That place of shame became a place of celebration, which is not always a behind-the-scenes process, but it is part of the movement of the gospel. When God moves in, shame gets interrupted. His forgiveness and his mercy and his kindness meets us not just in the moments that we feel are kind of polished but not quite right and we push out there, but the lowest of the low. The moments that we hope no one finds out about, the deep-seated activities or intentions of our own heart that we're like, man, if people knew that, they would push me away. I would be rejected. We see very early on in the Gospel of John that that's where Jesus moves into. One author would say, grace puddles in the low places. The kingdom shows up and shame is interrupted. They don't have to carry that, but it finds a place of restoration and healing at God's own hands. Some of us carry shame, and maybe it's a private shame that we don't hope that nobody else finds out publicly. Maybe it's a little bit more public, but it feels close. You live in fear of being found out. The good news of the kingdom is that Jesus' mercy and kindness, and hopefully his community as they follow, are able to hold space for that and bring and offer healing because of the good news of Jesus and what he's bringing into the world. Jesus is already in the places where we hope people don't find out about. And he's bringing about something beautiful even in those spaces if we let him. Next part, just to look at, God moved in what? You guys brought this out, obedience as participation in Jesus' mission. I love this part of the story, and I love that you guys pulled it out. And so I'll just comment on a few things because you guys already did so great at it. But you realize Jesus gives these servants a really strange instruction. And I don't know if you've ever worked as a part of a catering crew. Has anybody ever worked as part of catering, food service, that sort of stuff? If a random person in a party is asking you to do stuff, you usually just dismiss them. Like, right, you're not my boss. I don't get paid enough for this. And then when you had to fill up 180 gallons out of the well of water for everybody, you're really probably thinking, I don't get paid enough for this stuff, right? Like bucket after bucket coming out of the well, dumping it in. I mean, how big is your bucket really? A few gallons? I mean, and then every single one you're filling up with these jars that are meant for ceremonial cleaning. And so you're like, I don't know if the boss is going to like this. Like, we're literally just filling up their jugs. Like, they didn't ask us to do that. These have a set up purpose, but we're going to do what this guy told us to do. And we recognize that their obedience lets them be the closest to the miracle of anybody in the story. And so I think sometimes some of us are those that maybe see themselves as carrying buckets, that we're doing what God's called us to do slowly, faithfully, continually, but jar after jar, dumping it in. We're not seeing anything transform. And we're like, is God really doing anything here? This story stands out for the servants, reminding you that if you are obeying the words of Jesus, no matter how ridiculous it might seem to others, there is absolutely hope because Jesus is at work. He told you to do it for a reason. Stick with it. His work will be seen eventually. And some of us need that reminder. We need to remember that the text said they did what he told them to do, and we should just mark that down as our life verse. Would that be our aspiration, that Jesus looks towards us and say, hey, some people need something. Will you step into that role for me? And we say yes. What does that look like? Maybe year after year of faithful service in a neighborhood, or caring for a child, or caring for a parent, or caring for a community where it seems like nothing's changing, but we do the proverbial dumping the water from one bucket to the next, knowing that God told us to. So in due time, his work will be seen. This story reminds us that staying faithful to doing the words of Jesus is participation in the very mission of Jesus himself. And the plus side of that is they get to see the miracle more clearly than anyone. I guarantee when this story was told time and time again, the only people more excited than the bride and the groom were those servants. When they said, no, that was water. We pulled it out. We splashed it everywhere. We made a mess trying to get that. When we walked up to that, when we walked up to that head steward, our hands were shaking. We had a cup of water, and we're like, here, drink this. And when he drinks it, that's when it's the best that they've ever had. And we recognize that last piece that I would just say for us, that when God moves in, there is joyful abundance. Nick, I think you're spot on. There's no way they needed that much more. There was leftovers. Right? Like, God provides more than enough in a space where there was decidedly run out. That when we look and we say, God, I'm out. My efforts, my energy, my time, my dreams, my vision, my plans, my endurance, even if it was aimed in the right direction as I followed your word, God, I'm out. That the kingdom of God, Jesus himself steps in with this first sign, showing us in my kingdom. It's a kingdom of abundance, not of scarcity. And so, yes, sometimes we need to run out to figure out just how much Jesus has in store for us. But he absolutely meets us in that space with his grace, which is more than abundant. And so as I looked at the story this week and sat with it, those were the things the Spirit stirred up for me. And then I was praying, and I was like, all right, Jesus, like, how do you want us as a community, for our friends that gather here, what are some of the prompts that maybe we can look at that help us reflect a little bit in this story? And so I'm just going to read a few questions for you. You don't have to raise your hands on this. You're not going back to groups. But I think this story tells really good news to a few different kinds of people, all of which are found in this room. First, who here has done everything right, planned well, lived faithfully, and still feels like the wine's run out? You think of that bride and that groom. They didn't just like arbitrarily pick the amount of drinks they were going to have at their party. I mean, you can guarantee somebody had their little Excel spreadsheet out, first century version, whatever that is, and they were like, all right, we got X amount of people coming, and they drink X amount over this many days, and somebody did that computation on the sidewalk with chalk, right? Like, it was happening, because every family has at least one of those people that they find so much joy in that, and I'm glad you exist in this world. Maybe it's looking for us, though. We've looked at our lives, and we said, I planned it out. It's supposed to be going differently. I did the moves I thought I was supposed to do. I followed Jesus the way I thought I was supposed to. But it still feels like in my life, that joy, that abundance, that love, that life, that full and flourishing life that Jesus has called us into, it's run out, as evidenced by that wine. Another question, where maybe we carrying shame? the kind no one can seize, but you feel creeping in. And so when I say shame, I'm not going to give you a full, DSM-5 definition of what psychologically shame is. I would just say when you close your eyes and you're like, man, I feel it creeping up my neck, and I hope nobody ever finds out about that. When I think about this part of my life, this activity, whether in private or only a few people know about it, when I think about this community of people that I act a completely different way around, and I just feel it in my body, like that creeping up my neck, where I'm like, man, I hope nobody finds out about that. If people knew this about me, there's no way they would accept me. Let me just tell you, until that comes into the light, you will not find freedom. But as it comes into the light, Jesus offers welcome, not abandonment. The story shows us that. You've run out. Let me step in now that I've been asked for help. Where are the empty jars in your life? And so systems or habits or hopes that just aren't working anymore. Catch this, those jars were sitting there for a reason. They had a purpose in the Jewish law. They were used for ceremonial cleansing. They had a purpose in the old system. And what Jesus does is he takes that old thing that had a form and a function in their system of belief, and he fills it with new wine, a new thing, a cause for celebration. He takes what was old and transforms it into something new. And we're seeing that he's going to do that all throughout his life, where he takes that old story of Israel, he fills it up with new meaning, and the kingdom breaks in. And so I wonder if there are maybe some patterns in our lives that we say, hey, these are more religious than they are relationship with Jesus, but I've been leaning on them for a long time. And Jesus is inviting you maybe tonight to say, hey, what would it look like to follow me in a new, a fresh, a wild way that leans in again to what I'm doing right now, not just what I did in the past in your life? I think there's an invitation for us out of that. And then this last question might strike with some of you who have been following Jesus for a while, whether in an MC, leading an MC, serving in a capacity, anywhere in the world. But are you someone who's just been carrying water, doing what needs to be done quietly, faithfully, and you're feeling like, I don't know if God's going to come through? Like, I've got years of faithfulness, years of doing what's right, years of praying, years of serving, years of toiling, and I don't regret that, but right now I'm feeling empty. Will God come through and do what he said he would do? And tonight might be an opportunity for you to hear his voice afresh in this, the very first sign, the sign pointing forward to something that actually hasn't fully even happened yet in our time. When it isn't just the wedding feast of a bride and a groom hanging out in Cana, but the wedding feast of the Lamb in Revelation, where heaven and earth are being reunited and all tribes, tongues, and people come together at that great feast. That's what this wedding is pointing forward to. And so we take up our role still waiting, and maybe it's hearing Jesus' voice afresh, saying, stay faithful, do what I told you to do, and I will do what I promised I would. My kingdom is here. I have not left you. I have not forgotten you. Those questions are one that I hope resonate, maybe just one or more of them as you're processing. Our hope is that as we come together as a community, that this is a chance for us to sit under God's word, to be shaped by it, and then sent out to live like it's really true in the world. Because this isn't just a personal story. It's not just about me and how I look at things, but it's a communal story of the people of God. It's a cosmic story of the world being brought back together. Because of the kingdom, there will be a day of a full reunion, of joy, of celebration, of restoration, when the wine will not run out because God himself hosts the party. This kingdom is not just about individuals being healed, but communities being made whole. In the story in Revelation, there's a reminder that there's enough fruit on the tree of life to heal all the nations. This was just the first sign, but it points forward to the wedding feast of the Lamb and the day when God makes all things new, and we can be rest assured that when Jesus throws the party himself, the wine will not run out. And there will be space at the table for all who bowed their knee to King Jesus. Would you pray with me?